tonight.
Tony, thank you so much for having me here this evening, and thank you for joining. Loving the comments I am seeing already in the chat there.
Yeah, some good energy levels. A bank holiday helps, maybe, do you think?
Bank holiday and the beautiful weather that we have been having.
So how are your energy levels after probably, so are we almost 2 weeks old, the book?
Yeah, so we're coming up to 2 weeks. Last week was the fullest week in terms of publication activity. So we had a launch event at the Conduit, which was incredible, around 250 people showing up. And then after that, around 2 or 3 events a day, keeping me on my toes there.
Yeah, and I suppose it's been a month or so, hasn't it? Promotion, or probably a lot more actually. We've even been in touch for a lot longer than that. So it's been a long process, and now it's all here. So enjoying it, yeah.
Definitely loving every minute of it, and I've been sharing with friends that I think the best part of it has just been the fun and creativity of it all. You know, I've got a bit of a marketing brain, and so I very much enjoy getting the word out, especially when it's about things such as putting together a unique cocktail for Energize, to putting together a book trailer, to, at the moment, Tony, I'm working on doing a metaverse book launch as well, and so all of these things are so fun and really stretches my my boundaries.
It's here, it's out in the world now, which must be amazing after spending so long. I know that it's a process. And when you're not in book promotion world and in book world, what does a normal day in your life look like as a life coach and as a kind of self-help entrepreneur?
Sure, it's gonna be a bit cliche, but it's true, Tony, in the sense that there is no typical day. And so for me, that is also the beauty of the work that I get to do, because every week brings with it possibility. Every day you have no idea what is going to come your way. But in some sense, I believe that when everything is uncertain, anything is possible. And that's what energizes me every day, is this sort of feeling of possibilities. And so when I'm not in book promotion mode, most of my energy is focused on working with clients one-to-one, delivering keynote talks at companies and conferences, and also consulting and mentoring younger startup companies.
Great. And is it all around this, the idea of energy and energy management, or is it kind of optimization in lots of different ways?
Definitely. So it's really about understanding the foundational blocks, because I think that unless you address your own personal energy first, then all the strategies, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that you may be given, they become meaningless, because you just don't have the energy to follow through with them or apply it in a way that will be useful to you. And that is why we can often neglect our energy and only really address it when we burn out in the process of pushing and pushing.
Yeah. There's a quote, which I think I quoted at you on the Instagram live that we did as well, but I love this one. And I think it says a lot about the book. So, and your process, I suppose. So your energy is everything. It's the fuel that drives your success, and it gives you the power to achieve your potential. So how can you be your best self if you're always tired, stressed, and burnt out? Which totally makes sense, because I suppose everyone on this call and this Zoom, it's like we're all about kind of picking up hacks to kind of improve different areas of our lives or kind of learn about ourselves. But if we haven't slept well, if we're not protecting ourselves and looking and feeling good like that, then it's hard, isn't it, to then start using your brain in that kind of capacity, or kind of healing or growing or all the stuff we want to do. Oh, let me just unmute you there, sorry.
No. Well, when I looked at some of the most successful individuals in the research for my book, Tony, what I started to observe was that they weren't necessarily the fastest or the smartest or even the strongest of what they did. But what they had to their advantage is the ability to sustain their energy level so that they could show up each day as their best selves. I mean, they understood the fact that if you don't have the energy, then you cannot follow through with the things that you want to achieve. And the bigger and bolder your goals, the more important it is to have energy. It's like when you are sending a rocket to space, it takes a lot of energy to get that rocket off the ground and out of the Earth's atmosphere. But once it is out there, it doesn't need as much energy because it uses momentum to keep moving forward. And I think that is the same with us. Unless we've got a foundational baseline of sufficient energy to follow through with what we want to accomplish, we're never going to get to that point in which we experience the beauty of momentum, in which you start having that so-called I am going places feeling. You know, once you start having that feeling, you want to keep refining, keep tweaking, and keep putting things into action. But it's getting to that point first. And what you'll notice is that those who succeed in the long term, they understand also that it's not always about adding more to our life, which we can mistakenly believe it is. So we can read lots of books and we think we're going to keep adding more and more things into our life. But actually, it's about the subtraction. How can we hack away at the unessential so that we can focus on what matters most? And so, in fact, it's less about doing more and more about doing less of the choices, habits, and behaviors that are holding us back.
Sure. So identifying those things. We just read Essentialism. I think you know that.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect link for that. So yeah,
Mm.
identifying the things that really matter and then putting the energy into those. And I love the idea that one day, all the grind and the hustle, you will get to a point where you can kind of enjoy. It won't be so hard all the time, or it won't feel like that kind of like rocket launch level of energy required all the time. Once you put the groundwork in, you'll be able to then, like you said, keep refining, keep course correcting, but putting the energy, putting the work in now to build that momentum. Yeah, brilliant. I love that. So you say it's an art and a science. Is it both? Is it which? Like, how would you describe energy management?
Sure. It's a bit of both, and here's why. The art of it comes down to the fact that each of us will have different energy rhythms. So, some of us will be early risers, others will be night owls. And so we've got to reflect on at what periods of the day do we feel at our most energetic, and at what periods do we feel at our lowest. And now once we get insight on that, and again, this will be different to each of us, and this is where the art comes in. Once we have that data, we can then start building our day around that insight. But too often we focus on purely time management. And I think the challenge is when you focus purely on time management, you are assuming that your energy is constant throughout the whole day. And so when you start to schedule things into your diary, you might say, at 4 o'clock, I am going to go to the gym for 90 minutes. And then maybe around 6:30, I'm going to do this task that needs completing. Now, the challenge there is that on average, our energy tends to dip post the mid-afternoon. And so if we're starting to schedule those things there, it is actually very unlikely that we are going to follow through with it. So we are setting ourselves up for failure. But if we can start managing our day around where our points are highest and lowest, what happens is that we can work with our body and not against it. So I think that's where the art comes in. In terms of the science, it's really understanding some fundamentals. When I touch on invest in your health at the beginning of the book, I say, stop making your health a side hustle. And to stop making your health a side hustle, there are some science that backs the reasons why we have to have good rest, feed our body well, and exercise. Now, those are all been scientifically proven to elevate our energy levels. So there's no art there, it's just pure science. Get sufficient rest, eat well, and move your body on a regular basis, and you have a good baseline of energy. Now, beyond that, that's where the art comes in, because when we think about mental, emotional, and spiritual energy, that will be very unique to each of us. And so that's much more where the art comes in, Tony.
Yeah, it's all stuff we know, like a lot of that stuff, isn't it, that you kind of talked about, we know, but it's like, it's a science. There's a reason that we feel better when we do these things. And how did you get to become an expert in energy management? I think it's probably because you had to learn to manage it yourself at some point.
Definitely. I think the first moment where this insight started to come to me was when I was in the corporate world. So my background is I started in the financial services sector before gradually transitioning out to what I now get to do today. And the second job I had after Lehman Brothers, which was my first job, and I started at Lehman Brothers 14 months before it fell into bankruptcy. So, talk about a volatile start to your career post graduation. And so the second job I went into was at a hedge fund. Now, on the outside, Tony, that sounds glamorous, but the reality is it was only glamorous if you were at the top, if you were in senior management, if you were a portfolio manager. I was the junior in the team, one of only 2 juniors. So that meant I was more akin to a T-boy. I was getting the staff their lunches. I was making sure things were cleaned up and everything was operationally okay. There were no mistakes from the trading that was done in the portfolios. However, the hours were punishing. I was often in the office around 6 or 7 in the morning, all the way up until very often 10 or 11 at night. And when you add in client events on the back of that after work, that could often go into the next day. And it all came to a head one year when I came back early morning. And my wife just had to, my girlfriend at the time, but my now wife, had to have a serious conversation with me. You know, the next day when I was a bit more sober, she brought up some harsh truths about what she was observing with my behavior at work, but also the fact that I appeared lost. And it was challenging for me, Tony, to share some of this with her, because I had never been comfortable sharing what was going on in my, you know, in my mind with anyone, because I grew up in a world in which it wasn't like it is today. You know, there were no mental health resources, there were no forums or places that you could openly share. And the society I grew up in and the surroundings I had was much more about, Simon, man up, you know, pull your socks up, get on with life, get on with it. And so there was no real space to slow down and just be with your feelings and to really understand what they were telling you. And so I think my girlfriend at the time giving me that space to really open up, and her being willing to listen to what I was going through, really made me understand that if I didn't start addressing my physical and mental energy, then I would stand to lose more than just our relationship. And that for me was a big insight. It showed me how bad it was when you lack energy in every area of your life. And for me, I just had zero energy. I was wasting my time partying, drinking, you know, watching TV series for the whole weekend. It was all escapism from the harsh reality that my career trajectory had just spun out of control. And the first place I started to address is what I focus on in the first chapter of the book, was my physical health. And so I handed in my resignation, Tony, to that company a couple of days later after we had that conversation. And then I went about moving to another job in the financial industry, because that is all I knew. I couldn't move to any other job at the time. But in fact, I wanted to move to something that was more 9 to 5, something that was less stressful and less demanding on my time. So it gave me the opportunity to start prioritizing my health again. And that was when I had the chance to explore all the other areas. You know, once I got my physical health in check, it was, what did I want to do long term? And that is, and that is connected to spiritual energy. You know, I touch on this in the book, and spiritual energy is simply, I guess you can describe it like this: when you are low on spiritual energy, you are doing work that is not aligned to who you are. So the work that you're doing is frustrating for you because it's keeping your natural strengths and talents dormant. You're not getting the opportunity to express them, and you're not doing work that makes you feel alive. And so that's where we create some tension, and that's where we feel low on spiritual energy. Now, when we feel high on spiritual energy, that is when we are doing work that feels like an extension of who we are. You know, we enter periods of flow on a regular basis because we're given an opportunity to express ourselves freely. Now, taking that definition into account, when you look at society as a whole, you'll notice that many people are exhausted, not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing too little of the things that actually bring them joy, and they're running somebody else's race. And so what happens is that many of us are on this hamster wheel in which we're not controlling the speed or direction of that wheel, because we're looking at definitions of progress and success that are defined by other people. And so for me to really address my spiritual energy, it was about taking back control of what those things meant for me. You know, what did success mean to me? What did fulfillment look like? And what sort of impact that I wanted to have? And I noticed, and it's something I noticed also in my clients, Tony, is that once we start taking full responsibility for where we are and where we're going, that is when life truly begins. You know, that's when you start getting that excitement coming inside of you.
Yeah, so important to just get intentional, isn't it? And be proactive about what you want rather than reactive, which I think Sarah's saying she can totally relate. I can totally relate. I'm sure loads of people on this call can. Yeah, Gillian, autobiographical. Yeah, and like the idea that you can be really busy, like we can all be really busy, but it's not necessarily, that doesn't mean you're full of energy at all, does it? In fact, it's
Totally.
you can, we've all run on caffeine, haven't we, when you need to, but it's like if you're doing that for too long, that's like the idea of spiritual energy. I haven't heard that before, so I think that's brilliant.
And essentially what Sarah said, I'm just going to pick that up. She says, I think the pandemic helped with this because it stripped us of all the busyness, so we can decide whether we want to bring it back again. And that's so true, Sarah. You know, one of the things I've been talking a lot about during the last 2 years is that when we haven't been able to go outside, the only place we can go is inside. And so by going inward, what's happening is that we're connecting with our true selves. And that is why, as we've come out of the pandemic, we're seeing people really evaluate where they are in their life and whether they want to be doing the work they were doing pre-pandemic. And so in the US, you may have heard of the term the Great Resignation. And that is
Yeah.
because people are now resigning in droves because they've had this time over the last 2 years to do some deep introspection work. And they've understood, just as many of us do when we embark on this personal development or growth journey, that silence is far from empty. It is full of the answers, insight, and wisdom that we all seek.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, a lot of people are feeling like we all thought as soon as we went back to normal, whatever the new normal was, we'd all feel great and kind of like just buoyant because we could see people again, we could go back to work, we could go back to life. But I think for loads of people, there is a sense of not, maybe it's uneasiness, or maybe it's because we don't necessarily, we've had that kind of insight and we've had that time to that enforced mindfulness, but not everybody has been able to kind of recognize, I suppose, where they want to be. Maybe they just think, I probably don't want to be here anymore. So I think that's probably, I can definitely feel that in the kind of conversations we have in the community and with friends and things.
Definitely. And it's interesting because when we think about, and the word that's coming up to my head, Tony, as you're sort of speaking there, is this sense of purpose. You know, a lot of us have been questioning, do I feel like I have purpose in my life? And even though many people aren't following whatever their purpose is, because many people still don't know what their purpose is. And I think this is an interesting sort of topic, because a lot of people I know will say, I am not going to take action because I don't know what my purpose is yet. So once I know what my purpose is, I will take some steps forward. But the irony is that we don't know our purpose until we start taking action. And so a nice, softer way to begin the journey to discovering our purpose is something I know a lot of people have been doing in the last couple of years, which is simply following your curiosities. And it's a lot softer, actually, when we ask ourselves, what am I most curious about right now? And it may not always lead you to where you want to be, but often it opens doors and opportunities that would never have opened unless you followed those curiosities. And I think once you follow those clues, it will eventually lead you to understanding what your purpose is.
Totally. Everyone on this call is here because they followed their curiosity about a book club, about, you know, self-help books, and about you, and that's how you meet the right people, you get the right links. When I interviewed you on Instagram, the 3 books that you shared were so brilliant, and that my brain has now gone off in like all different places. I'll share them on the chat in a minute for everybody here, but just things like that. So then when you decide to follow them, it opens up so many different more opportunities. Yeah. And so thank you for that. So we're coming up to 7:25. Should we go through some parts of the book? Because I was going to ask about the 3 different parts of the book, but maybe you can explain as you go through the exercises.
Definitely. So I'm going to pick out a couple of exercises for us to do together. So make sure, if you haven't already, get a notepad and pen, or if it is easier, because we do have the chat open, if it is easier, feel free to type straight into the chat so we can see your responses there. So if you have a pen and paper, great. If not, do not worry. Feel free to just type straight into the chat, because then we can see what each of us is sharing. So the book, if you don't have it already, then I'll share with you what the 4 parts are for reference. So the book is split into 4 parts, and it really mimics in some way my own journey, as well as the lessons I've learned along the way. So the first part of the book is called Awaken Your Power, which is really where my journey started. And within that first part, we look at the importance of physical energy. We look at the importance of elevating our consciousness through writing, through journaling, through gratitude, and also focusing on what matters most. The second part of the book is called Rewire Your Energetic State, and that has a lot to do with our mental energy. You know, often when we think about energy, we default to the physical side while forgetting that the mental side plays a huge role as well. And then the third part of the book is protecting your personal energy, because once you're living from a place of energy, you've got to be mindful about how you are spending that energy. And then the final part is a nice way to finish off the book. It is called Supercharge Your Impact. And that speaks a lot to the fact that our value as humans is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. So how will you go on to write your own legacy? So that's the 4 parts of the book. So I'm going to just take a couple of exercises from different parts to share with you. And I want to start with this one because this exercise is one of the first that I do with every new client that I take on board in my coaching program. And so this will give you an insight as to what we look at within the very first session that I work with a client. And so the question is this. Today, it is 3rd of May, 2022. Now, what I want us to do is to fast forward ourselves to the 3rd of May, 2027. So that is 5 years from now. So just imagine that all of us here were to catch up again 5 years from now on the exact same day today. And you were to tell me in this meeting, you were to say to me, Simon, the last 5 years have been the most extraordinary and magical in every sense of the word in both my personal and professional life. What would be the things that you would be saying to me as if they have already happened or are happening at this moment? So take a moment to write that down, or if you like, put it straight into the comments so we can see what you have there. So again, I'll repeat the question and then I'll share with you a bit of my backstory while I give you some time to share in the comments on the right. So again, today is the 3rd of May, 2022. I want us to transport ourselves forward onto the 3rd of May, 2027, 5 years from today. And imagine that you and I were to bump into each other and you were to say to me, Simon, so good to meet you. By the way, the last 5 years have been the most extraordinary and magical in every area of my life. What would you be telling me? So I'll give you a moment now to write down your thoughts. And if you do finish, then make sure to share your comments in the chat. And I will bring some of those out so we can see what you have been sharing. So thank you, David. David has sort of referenced the question in the chat, so you can have it there as reference as you think about your response. But just to give you an illustration of how powerful this exercise is, I've been doing a lot of interviews recently on radio and on some podcast channels. And a question that I got asked was, Simon, where were you 10 years ago and 5 years ago? So this will give you some context to this question as you think about your response. So 10 years ago, it was 2012. I had only just signed on to do my very first coaching certification. And this was while I was in a 9-to-5 corporate job still. So I was balancing doing a full-time job and trying to get qualified as a coach. And that took me just over 2 years. So I completely finished in 2014. And that's when I started the transition out of the industry. Where was I 5 years ago? 5 years ago was 2017. In 2017, I was just leaving the corporate world. And here's what I want to share with you as you are putting your responses down. There is a quote that goes, we overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 5. Think about this for a moment. In the last 5 years, I have quit my corporate job. I have gone on to coach full-time. I have spoken at some of the planet's most successful companies, and I've just published my first book with Penguin. That is in 5 years. 5 years. And this is the power of understanding, forwarding yourself to that 5-year point and looking back, thinking, what have you achieved? How will you know that would have been the most incredible 5 years of your life? And I'm going to help you make that even more real so that you can take what you've written down and start to feel it inside of you. Fantastic. So if you can start sharing your comments into this, that'd be great. And if you have any questions on this, I see a comment coming from Emma, so I'm going to come back to this in a second. So I now spend half the year in Ibiza building the online self-help community, which is now in the thousands, and managing our hundreds of thousands of local hosts. Amazing. Emma saying, anyone else finding it hard to picture this? I normally find tasks like this easy, but struggling today whilst yawning absolute lack of energy. Well, no worries, Emma. I think with this is not to put pressure on yourself to have absolute certainty. Whenever you do an exercise like this, you of course will not have 100% clarity. but you may have some idea of how you will know that in 5 years' time, you can look back and feel that it has been extraordinary for you. And that's where you want to start. Just start with whatever you have. Because once you start there and you take some action, which I'm going to touch on in a second, what happens is that will get clarity. And the reason it can be challenging actually is often because we've never done this before. We've never done this exercise before. And that is why this is one of the first things that I do with new clients. It's the first thing I do simply to get them thinking about this. Because put it this way, you probably put together a 5-year plan, a 1-year plan, and a 90-day plan for your company that you work for. But when was the last time you took time and did one for yourself and for your life? So just something to think about there. But again, Emma, don't put too much pressure on yourself here. Just kind of think about whatever comes to your mind, start there. It doesn't have to be long. Some of us, it might just be a sentence or two. Others, we might have a whole paragraph. So there's no right and wrong with this. It's just having a starting point, and then we're going to build on that in a moment. So David says, I love to have my own private counseling practice, have grown my own personal profile with my own book written. Yes, David, and published, and with a successful podcast and TED Talk in the works, shooting big here, guys. Love these, Tony and David. Emma is now ahead of energy. I love it, 100% yes. Val, love it. Here we go, got more coming in from Andrea. I took more risks, quit my tech job, went into hospitality full-time, opened my first cafe, and made Australia my home. I love how definitive that was, Andrea. David said, so true, I spent hours doing a strategy for my client, but don't strategize myself. Sue said, I'm obviously not thinking high enough. I've only written working part-time and family safe. Need to revisit this. And Sue, that is completely fine. As I said, this should be a working document. You know, the thing about writing this down is we should never just write it down and forget it. That's what most of us would do. What I'm challenging you to do is once you've got this written down now, put it into a working document that you can see every day. Because once you started to read that, feel it, and emotionalize it, your brain will start filling in the rest each day because now it's active in your thinking. So Cheryl was saying, living comfortably in my own home in a stable, loving relationship and doing a job I love. And I'm excited to get up in the morning and start my day from Julianne. Amazing. Now, once you've got this, as I said just now, you want to write this down somewhere that you can see it every day. For me, I have it in my Google Keep. I don't know if any of you use Google Keep, but Google Keep is fantastic because it's an app on my phone. I can update it each day when I come up with new thoughts and new ideas. And that is the whole thing, is that once you take small steps forward towards whatever that is you're looking to work towards in 5 years' time, more things will unravel. You have more ideas, you have more aspirations, and that's where you can keep tweaking and adjusting that vision that you've got down for yourself. And here's the powerful thing behind this. If you've read my book, you will remember that in chapter 3, entitled Focus on What Matters Most, there is a story that I share about Bruce Lee. And in this story, Bruce did exactly this exercise that I just got you to do. And he achieved every single thing that he wrote down in 4 years. So what he had on that paper was that he saw himself as the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. He saw himself in possession of $10 million, and he saw himself spreading martial arts across the world to popularize it amongst Western countries. And all of that was achieved in 4 years. Now, as you get clearer on what this vision is, here's how we can deepen your connection to it. I'm going to bring into this a concept that I share later in the book, and it is called a real life vision board. Now, you will have heard of the concept of a vision board. A vision board is simply you put something on your wall and you put all of these pictures on it, and they sort of motivate and inspire you to work towards that vision. Now, for me, I love taking that 2D concept and making it real, because what happens is that it immerses your mind and your emotions into the world of possibility. So just to give an example, if you had in your 5-year vision, or where you'll be in 5 years, how will you know it's where you want to be? And let's say you had in there that you were driving a Tesla, or you were living in an apartment overlooking the river or a park. You can immerse yourself in that experience right now. You can immerse yourself there right now. So let's say in there, you had the idea of you driving a Tesla car. My challenge to you is to go to your local Tesla dealership and book a test drive. If you wanted to stay in an apartment in your vision overlooking a river or park, Airbnb, Stay there for 1 or 2 nights, and you're immersing yourself in that as if it's happening in the now. Because what you're doing is you're taking that 5-year position of your life and you're bringing it into the present moment. And what you're telling your subconscious is that this is possible. This can actually happen because I am doing it right now. You're giving yourself a taster, if you will, of what that life could look like. So that is the first exercise. You can see some comments coming here. People here love vision boards. Amazing, Emma. David saying, love making these come to reality. And it's incredible. I mean, I have been playing with real life vision boards myself so much throughout my career that often the real life vision board actually accelerates your journey. I'll give you a great example. Now, before I could afford to spend time in members clubs, and members clubs are great if you want to expose yourself to very different communities, but they cost, they cost you a bit of money to join every year. So before I could afford to join, I said to myself, one of my vision boards is to spend time in members clubs because of the people that they have in that community. But how could I give myself a real life vision board version of that, but without having to spend the money? Because I just want to sample and flavor of it now. And the universe works in mysterious ways. I was in a WH Smith and I was looking through the magazine rack, and I love traveling. So I picked up a copy of Condé Nast Traveler, and I looked at the back and I saw that they had a Condé Nast event series. And that this particular event was an interview with the traveler Ben Fogel, who had a TV show at the time. And he was being interviewed at the Annabelle's Members Club. And the ticket price was just £20 to attend. And I said, that is going to be my real life vision board. I'm going to pay £20, get a ticket, go to Annabelle's and get to hear Ben Fogel speak. And so that one night for 5 hours during the drinks, the event and the post networking, I got to experience what it was like to be in a members club with the people in that community. And suddenly, before I knew it, that acceleration of my journey sped up so fast, because then I built relationships with people there. I got invited to another members club because of someone I connected that evening. And so this is the power of playing and having fun with a real life vision board. Sue saying, this is awesome. Thank you. And I hope this has stimulated your imagination of how you can have a bit of fun with whatever is in your 5-year vision or vision board, and bring that into the present moment. Because what happens is that energizes you. That energized me to think bigger. And if there's one thing I will note before we move on to the next exercise, it is this. And Andrea's saying, I love Ben Fogel. Ben Fogel fans here tonight. It is this. There are always 2 sales that happen. The second is selling you to others, and the first is selling you to you. And until you can sell you to you, selling you to others will always remain a challenge. So once you sold you to you on the vision that you want to manifest, on where you imagine yourself to be 5 years from today, and that you can create that in your life, then the real life vision board becomes something of a bit of fun and play. So that's the first exercise. The second is something that has been scientifically proven to immediately impact your energy. And it is gratitude, but I'm going to add 2 words at the end here. It is gratitude with intention. It is gratitude with intention, because when we express gratitude with intent, what we are doing is we are slowing down and we are connecting ourselves to the feeling of gratitude, rather than just writing 3 things down quickly, turning the page and thinking of the next day what we're going to be grateful for. So it's less of a tick box activity and more of an experiential activity. And this is the exercise that has been proven time and time again to elevate people's energy, especially if you are feeling particularly low in energy. Emma, I might be speaking out to here, who mentioned earlier. So here's the exercise. Again, if you have your notepad and pen, jot what comes to your mind first, and then share it in the comments once you have finished. And there are 3 steps to this. So the first is, I want you to write down the name of somebody that you can be grateful for. The first name that pops up in your head. Now, this can be a partner, it can be a family friend, it could be a colleague, it could be a mentor. Whoever comes up into your head first, put the name of that individual down. The second step is to write down, why did you choose that person? Why was that the first person that came up in your head? And just to help you, to give you some prompts, if you're somebody that likes to have a few prompts on this particular exercise, How have they helped you? In what ways have they showed up in your life to support you? And what would life be like if they were not in your life? So just a couple of prompts to get you thinking. And it is important in this part of the exercise to write down your thoughts in as much detail. And you'll see why in the third part. So again, why did you choose this person? And why were they the first individual that popped up into your head that you can be most grateful for? So I'll just give you another 30 seconds. And then again, if you have already finished, feel free to share your responses in the chat. But I'm going to say, just for efficiency, so I can read the comments, because otherwise we might get a lot of comments here, just put the name or the reference of the person that you chose. So you don't have to put down why. You can if you want, that'd be great. But at a minimum, it'd be great if you can just put the name or the reference of that person. So uncle, aunt, wife, husband, partner, whoever comes to mind. If you can put that down, it'd be great, just to kind of see the people that we've chosen. So Sue has started by sharing, my boss, supportive, solid advice and boundless energy, inspires and influences me daily in a challenging work environment. Tony saying Sharu, friend, Karen, brother, mum, husband. Mum, best friend, inspires, a wonderful, kind colleague. Matthew, friend who may become more. Amazing. Sounds hopeful there. I love Shapiro, my husband. Sarah, best friend, husband. Great. So a nice sort of variety of names that you've got written down, and hopefully you've had a chance to finish why you chose them. Now, the third part of this exercise is really where the magic happens. And as soon as you finish this third part of the exercise, this is where we can experience a surge of energy and a lift in our mood. So what I'd like you to do, not now, because we are here together on this Zoom session, but after this call, what I want you to do is to pick up the phone and call that person and read out what you wrote in step 2. So for example, you might say, I'm going to draw out an example here. It could be, let's see who we have here, your colleague. So let's say somebody just mentioned a colleague. So you might drop them a call. Again, I don't want to press you. So I would say, if you're not comfortable with a call, do a voice note. The key is they have to hear your voice. So if you're not comfortable dropping a call to them and having a conversation with them, sharing that, drop them a recorded voice note. It will have a very similar effect. So I might say, if it's my colleague that someone has mentioned here, hey, I just want to drop you a quick message. I've been thinking about the people that I am most grateful for in my life right now, and you are one of the first that popped up into my head. And I just wanted to share with you why. And then you go into what you wrote down and notice what you notice. Send it and just wait. Now, here's what happens, is that the recipient isn't the only one that benefits from this act of gratitude. What happens is that because you express gratitude with intent, what happens is that you are now feeling that abundance. You know, Pam Grant noted it best when she said that gratitude with intent is the gateway drug to abundance. And so you will start to feel connected, more connected to that person that you've just shared that note with. So that is the second exercise I would love for you to do. Slightly more challenging than what we did in the first activity, but this will have a profound impact on your energy. So do this after this call. Remember, knowledge may be power, but action is where the real magic is. And if you are connected with me on social media, or if not, you can find me. I would love to hear from you. And this is my bit of accountability to you. I would love to hear from you how you found the experience, and of course, how they responded. So drop me a direct message, drop me a voice note, whatever you're comfortable with. And I'd love for you to share with me how you found that activity. So that is the second exercise. The third is a bit of fun. So the third for me is a concept that I share in the book. Okay, so what Emma's saying here, I'm sending a voice note after this as I know my work colleague will cry. Emma, I would love to hear from you and to hear what happens from this conversation. So, you know, do drop me a message after. Simon, are you on Twitter? Yes, I am. The handle is the same as my Instagram. It is at Simon Alexander O. So pretty easy. I'm the same handle on both platforms. So this final exercise is a bit of fun to finish up. And it taps into the fact that our environment is one of the most potent forces there is out there to help us make meaningful progress forward. In fact, often when I get asked, when I do my talks at companies and at conferences, what is the fastest way to make progress in my life, my business, or my career? I often say the following: design an environment around you that makes it impossible not to succeed. Now, when I talk about environment, I'm not just talking about the people that we spend time with. I'm touching on what we watch, who we follow on social media, what we listen to, the physical environment we're in. All of these things have an influence on our thinking and what we see as possible for ourselves. Now, this fun exercise was more as a result of some people saying to me, Simon, I know you spend time with some incredible people doing wonderful things, but what if I don't have access to that? What if I can't just go, yeah, next weekend I'm going to hang out with some CEOs and some Michelin star chefs or these sorts of people? And I said to them, it wasn't always that way. And this was a technique that I leaned on when I was in exactly the same position as you. And it is called an MBA. Now, I'm not talking about the qualification you get when you go to a business school. For me, an MBA stands for Mental Board of Advisors. And so when I did not have access to the sorts of people that I now have access to, I had to imagine that I was in that environment. And so I started to pick my own board of advisors, and I would enter that room mentally by closing my eyes, going into a boardroom, pulling out the seat at the head of the table, taking my position there, and then sharing my challenges, my questions, and my big decisions that I was sitting on the fence with into this community of advisors who I would go to each person in turn to hear what they had to say. And so I would love to hear from you. This one you don't have to write down, just put it straight into the chat. Who would you pick to be on your mental board of advisors, dead or alive, that you could seek counsel from when you needed a different perspective, when you needed some advice and support in a particular moment of your life? Who would be best on that mental board of advisors of yours? So we've got Marie Forleo, we've got Brené Brown. I'm resonating with these people. Stephen Bartlett, fantastic. Tony Robbins, though he'll probably scare me. Well, I guess we could see that in a good way. Sometimes people can scare us and challenge us. So that could be a good thing as well. Mel Robbins, great stuff. And just to share with you some of those I have on mine to throw into the mix, I would have Bruce Lee as one of them. Now, not for his martial arts, but for his way of thinking, his philosophy of life. I would also have someone called Nick Vujicic. I don't know if any of you come across Nick's work, but Nick was born without limbs. And his mother even didn't want to hold him when he was presented to her at birth. And he went on from that tragic beginnings to launch businesses, become a motivational speaker, start a family with multiple children, all despite having limbs. And he is, for me, a beautiful example of the fact that anything is possible. We've got Christopher Hitchens, Obama, Oprah, Michelle Obama, and Dolly Parton. Such an eclectic mix here today. It's always great to see the names that we are bringing up. We've got, so both Obamas, fantastic. Now, what happens is that once you've got this mental board of advisors of yours, you have them now as a reference point. So if you want to immerse yourself in an environment, especially if you need to dilute a negative environment that you often may not have control over. So for example, you may be working in a negative environment at work, or you may have negative family members around you that you simply can't get rid of. And so this is a beautiful way to help you dilute that energy. So you can introduce more positivity within your environment. And so keep in mind that when you do put together your MBA, and you don't want no more than around 4 to 6, because otherwise it's too many people to remember mentally. So keep it small, and remember that you can interchange people whenever you like. So there may be some people that you want to lean on more on a particular problem than another. So you can choose the composition and change it however you like. So those are the 3 activities. We still got a bit of time, so I'm going to inject one more idea for you. And this is related to environment, the last exercise we did. I'm often asked how we can be more creative in our thinking, especially when it comes to having some fun. in the creative process, because for me, that's what makes things enjoyable. You got to find enjoyment and fun in the journey. Otherwise, it can feel like a chore. And so connected with environment, one of the things I want to challenge you on is how can you introduce more diversity into your environment? Now, here is what I mean by this. When I started my career journey into what I'm doing, a lot of people have now asked me on reflection, Simon, you do things very different to a lot of people that I know in your space. How do you go about thinking differently? Now, what I say to that is, I consciously didn't spend all of my time with fellow coaches and speakers. And there's a reason for that. Because if you only spend time around people in your industry, such as your competitors, and you only try and look at what they're doing, then you can only be as good as your competitors. And that already sets a limit and a bar to your progress. However, when you start introducing diversity in terms of industry, background, experience, location into your environment, what happens is that you create space for creativity and innovation to be born. And here's a couple of examples just to show you how this can bring your creative energy to life. So over the last couple of years, I introduced some people from hospitality into my environment. And I got connected to somebody who heads up the world's best bar, the Connaught Hotel. Now, if it wasn't for that connection in my environment, I would never have come up with the idea to design a cocktail at the Connaught Hotel to mark the launch of my book. So if you have the opportunity to go to the Connaught Hotel, you can now ask the bartender for an off-menu item for an Energized cocktail. Can I have the Energized cocktail by Simon Alexander Ong? And they will put that drink together for you. If it wasn't for the fact that I connected with a BBC film director, again, a very different industry to mine, I would never have come up with the concept to create a book trailer, because he talks about film trailers. You know, the film trailer is to hype up the launch of a new release. Now, for me, I thought, well, why can't I bring that into a book promotion? I can design a book trailer to promote the launch of the book, and then I can share it on YouTube, and suddenly everyone can share that with their network. And so what happens is that when we add more diversity into our environment, we start having greater fun with the creative thinking of the process. Tony, back to you.
Back to me. Thank you. That was so good. I love all those exercises. MBA, an MBA, is it for this advisory board? Is it always? It's not always business related, is it?
No,
I mean, obviously, what we put lots of self-development, because we are the self-development geeks. Yeah. This is who we are. But yes, could it be? It could be. So, like you said, your examples were all very different in different walks of life, and so it's just about kind of, well, it's rounded individuals that could give you advice in lots of different areas, I suppose.
Definitely, and I think your composition will change as your life changes. And so now that I'm a parent and I'm still running a business, but at the same time I'm managing the role of being a father, my mental board advice will also shift, because now I've got people on there that are also fathers that I can relate to now, because I'm in that same position. And so as your life changes, which it will, and you go through milestones in your journey, you will want to shift the composition to reflect where you are on your path. Yeah,
sure. Sue's actually made a comment that she has connections but doesn't follow through. So what do you think that's about? Is that some self-sabotage, or is that just about trusting that they'll go somewhere?
Well, Sue, in my book, I had the fortune of interviewing Keith Ferrazzi, and Keith Ferrazzi is famous for writing the book Never Eat Alone, which became a New York Times bestseller. And it's funny because when I just saw your comment, it reminded me of one of his chapters in his book Never Eat Alone. And one of his chapters is called Follow Up or Fail. And so it's a beautiful call for the fact that if we want to cultivate connections and relationships, it is all about the follow-up, and also how we follow up. You know, if any of you have connected with me on LinkedIn, 90% of the time, what happens is that if you send a connection request to me and I accept, it is very likely that I will also drop you a 7 to 10 second voice note just to say hello and welcome to my network. And I tell you what, that simple act can have huge impact on the relationships you build. I've got so many messages from people saying, Simon, I've got over 15,000 connections, and that is the first voice note on LinkedIn I have ever received. And that's because, again, I'm thinking about how I can make this process of building relationships fun. Because when you inject some fun into it, what happens is that you have the energy to do more of it. And so me dropping those voice notes, here's also why it's pretty cool. Because if you saw a normal text message come up as a preview on your phone, well, you can ignore it. You can say, oh, I'll come back to that later on the weekend, or I'll reply next week. But if you receive a voice note, it taps into your curiosity. You want to know what is in that message, and you cannot find out until you click play. And once you click play on that message, you get somebody's energy. You can feel somebody's energy much more than a simple text message. And that is why, when I go back to the gratitude exercise, that is why I said you have to, at a minimum, do a voice note. Even better if you can have a call with someone or talk to them directly, but at a minimum, do a voice note. Because when they hear your voice, there's a certain energy that is transmitted between two people when you use your voice.
Yeah, that is so true. So true. And it's so true that when you make things fun and enjoyable for you, of course, that gives you more energy rather than thinking, oh, I've got to go through the inbox or I've got to do that. It's like, if you're making connection and something that, yeah, you really enjoy, then you're going to be really good at it. That makes so much sense.
Definitely.
Guys,
So
if you've got any general questions,
so if
I thought they could maybe just drop them now. Yeah,
make sure to drop them in the chat. I want to make sure I can answer all your questions. So if you have any questions, make sure to drop in the chat now. Or if you prefer, as I know some people may do, if you prefer to ask me privately, then feel free to connect with me after this session is finished. But yeah, share in the comments, or if you want to be anonymous, actually, share with me directly. So you can select just to me if you want. So you can send the chat to me, and I won't reference your name. I will just reference your question into the broader room here.
Simon, I'm just going to share the 3 books as well that you shared with me.
Perfect.
When I asked you about what, because you read a lot of personal development and self-development, and the and I love the Never Eat Alone. I'm going to order that. Loads of people have already ordered your book off the chat already, which is great. So I think it was these 3: The Go Giver, is that right? Yep. The Psychology of Money, and then The Infinite Game. So guys, these are 3 books that Simon's recommended to me previously when I said, you said these are the books that you would kind of like give to people as gifts or would recommend. Definitely. As a...
I'll just give a quick overview in case people missed the IG live or they weren't there when we spoke.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So The Go Giver, the reason I shared that is because when I'm asked what book do I recommend, that is always the first one that comes in my head. And it's a book that I reread every single year. The co-author Bob Berg has become a fantastic mentor to me over the years. And it is a book that, if like me, you enjoy reading, which I know you do, you will probably finish it in one night. It is a very easy read. It is principles of success built into a short story. And so that is one that I always recommend. Psychology of Money, for me, is a book that I wish I'd read when I was a teenager. Because, you know, when we grow up, we are taught 2 things with money: how to save and how to spend, but we're not taught how to invest. And what the Psychology of Money does is that it does not give you investment strategies, because everybody will have a different strategy depending on their circumstance, but it teaches you about the behavioral science of the money mindset. And so it's a fascinating book that talks and taps into the psychology side of things, which for me was hugely insightful. And just to illustrate the power of the compound effect, there was a powerful statement in which he said that if you look at Warren Buffett's net wealth, and I think the number was around, at the time of the book, it was around something like 86 billion or something like that. They basically said 85.2 or close to that full number was accumulated after his 60th birthday. And he said the numbers behind that is mind-boggling. But when you look at the graph of the compound effect, that's how you can see the power of consistency. So that book is great. Yeah, that book is incredible in terms of really understanding the psychology side of money and how it's so important to have a foundational money mindset if we want to have wealth in our lives. The Infinite Game, Simon Sinek. Well, I love Simon, not just because he shares the same name with me, but you know, he endorsed the book, which is a nice win, but also because of all the books that he has written, Start With Why, Leaders Eat Last, Better Together, and The Infinite Game. For me, The Infinite Game is the best of all the books that he has written. And it talks so well about the fact that many of us are playing a finite game, and that we can only truly succeed and thrive in business if we are playing the infinite game. And just to give an example, the finite game is if I was running a business and I said to you, my goal is to be the best in the industry. Now, that is a finite game because, I mean, the best according to whom? Over what time period? Who's deciding the metrics? And so it's a finite game because you are setting the rules, but then, it's subjective. Whereas the infinite game is simply focusing on being better than who you were yesterday. And when you do that, you become a company that can adapt. So you don't become a Nokia or a BlackBerry, you become like an Apple or Google. You constantly adapt regardless of the external environment. And the other one I shared today, which Tony gave a shout out to just now, is Never Eat Alone, which was written by Keith Ferrazzi. And you may have come across the community called Summit, which bring together some fascinating minds across the world. It has had the likes of Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Simon Sinek, and Jason Silver speak at their conferences. And that started with the principles shared in Keith Ferrazzi's book about how you can start building a powerful network and community around things that you're passionate about. And then it grew to become a community and now to become a movement. And so for me, that is fantastic when it comes to understanding the mechanics of relationship building.
Sure. Has Simon Alexander Ong spoken there yet?
Not yet, unfortunately.
Not yet.
Because of COVID. So I think they're looking to plan their first in-person later this year.
Well, there you go. Expect to see you there. Thank you, Simon, so much. We just got one question from Sarah. Any books to recommend about self-sabotage, or maybe any general techniques as well?
Yeah, so I would say if I were to recommend a book on self-sabotage, it would actually be from one of my favorite writers. Her name is Brianna Wiest. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, but she has a beautiful profile. She writes incredibly well. Every time I read her posts on Instagram or her articles, it is like her words are having a conversation with my soul. And so the book I'm going to recommend to you, Sarah, in relation to your question on self-sabotage, it is a book by hers called The Mountain Is You. It's called The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. And it does touch on a lot about how we self-sabotage ourselves, but also how we can avoid doing so. And a lot of that has to do with being kinder to who we are as a person, and being comfortable with the emotions that we may go through in any journey that we undertake. So check that out. And I'd love to hear what you think, Sarah. Just seeing if there's any other comments. Andrea, thank you so much for the comments. This was fantastic. Simon, you're amazing. I look forward to being in touch with social media. I have to log out. Have an amazing day all. Have an amazing day and week ahead, Andrea.
Thank you so much. I think we'll say goodnight to you then. Everyone seems to be, I think you've given us so much. Everyone's writing their notes. Hopefully everyone's getting ready to leave their voice notes for their gratitude with intention recipient. Oh yeah, David, thank you. Don't forget to join our membership. Yes, anyone who's still here, we are reading Lost Connections. We talked a bit about connection tonight, didn't we? And the importance of it. Lost Connections is our book for the next 2 months. And we'll be doing our first meetup next Monday for that. So another week to join the membership if you're not already a member. But thank you, Simon, so much for your time. Good luck with the book. Yeah, it's been such a ride, hasn't it? And we really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. So thank you so much. And thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you so much. And hopefully I get to meet some of you at an in-person self-help event in the near future.
Yeah, should we do that, guys? Self-help and Simon? Yeah, that would be awesome. At the Connaughts. I think we could do it there. Yes, please. Yeah.
How cool would that be? As everyone's sort of collecting their Energized cocktails.
Oh, it would be amazing. Let's make it happen. I'll put it on the list, the 5-year plan.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you, guys.
Take care and good night.
Take care. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.